independent chair of the Code of Conduct panel, and I'm going to be hosting today. If I may begin with an acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, the Property Council of Australia and all of us acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Thank you, and welcome to all of you who have joined the presentation today. I think we're nearly up to 150 people, which is absolutely amazing. I want to thank very much the Property Council and Deborah McDonald for helping us run this session, and also to our esteemed speakers who I'm going to introduce. So what are we going to do today? We're going to explore emergency management for retirement villages, focusing on the recent changes of legislation for defibrillators, and trust me, defibrillators is quite hard to say, lithium-ion batteries, and then also discuss planning for extreme weather events, floods and fires. And why are we doing this? Well, it's at all of our core business and it's on our minds, but also in the Code of Conduct in C 4.1, all code signatories say they will maintain written policies and procedures concerning general safety and security, electrical safety, fire safety, and emergency management. So that's how it links to the code. But I'm sure everybody on this presentation really feels that this is a core thing that we need to put emphasis on. Now, of course, this event is on Teams, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions after all the presentations. We think we'll have 10-minute blocks, and then right at the end, we'll have a really decent time for questions. Please, during, while you're thinking about things or when the Q&A starts, can you please put your questions into the chat box, and I will relay the questions to the speakers. That would be good. And the other thing I should tell you is that Deborah, our wonderful code administrator, is recording this session, and all speakers have generously said they'll make their slides available. So you'll be able to get copies of all that. So now I'm very pleased to introduce John O'Callaghan from Access. I'm not pleased to introduce him because in fact he's in Hawaii and he's making us all jealous. But I do think it's wonderful that you've made time, John, to give this presentation when you're on holidays. So in 2004, John O'Callaghan founded Access Health with a mission to revolutionise technology within the healthcare industries, offering vital support and assistance to their personnel and customers. Drawing from 2 decades of experience in technology enhancement, John was compelled to act after receiving a plea from Tony Randello, CEO of Aveo, regarding a string of fires in Australia caused by lithium-ion batteries overcharging. And I'm sure you all remember that terrible tragedy, I think in South Australia. So he swiftly devised a solution with input from Tony. Within weeks, they conceptualised and produced the Switch Star, a groundbreaking power outlet that automatically shuts off after 8 hours, eliminating the risk of overcharging. Unlike its counterparts, this innovation requires no programming, apps, or Wi-Fi connectivity. It is ready to use once installed by a certified electrician. Access Health remains at the forefront of technological advancement in aged care and retirement sectors, particularly in telecommunications and personal alarm systems, and continues to pave the way for safety and efficiency for such critical situations that occur within our industries. So over to you, John, and many thanks.
I was about to say, I think I'm done now, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
No worries.
Just bring up. The right screen to share.
Oh,
Can you now see that up there now?
yes, we
Yeah,
can. Thank you,
beautiful.
John.
So yeah, so as Elizabeth just mentioned, so I'd been discussing with Tony at dinner one night about lithium-ion fires that were occurring in Australia and the risk that's associated with it. And true to my word, approximately a week later, Tony rang me and said, "You won't believe what's just happened." And the concept originally started with a golf club I am a member at in Melbourne. A $20 million clubhouse burnt down, and that fire, we watched it happen. That clubhouse was totally incinerated within about 15 minutes, and it was a little bit different there, where they had several golf buggies that were in storage. So once one golf buggy exploded, the rest of them exploded. So that was a little bit sort of over the top as far as how quickly something will burn. But some of the things that we'll show you as we go through the slideshow is actually how devastating these fires can be, and what we can do as leaders in retirement and aged care and other industries in how we can sort of make our residents safer. We can't stop them from going off and buying these devices such as power tools, golf buggies, electric carts, scooters, mobility scooters, etc. But what we can try to do is educate them and make the environment safer, not just for them, but for neighbours as well. So, so the most common fires that we see in Australia at the moment are the mobility scooters, power tools, and golf buggies, believe it or not. Laptops that we're showing there, so laptops, mobile phones, and those types of things, whilst they can explode and catch on fire, usually that's in instances where we drop our mobile phones consistently and we damage the battery, so that they won't tend to actually explode, but they'll tend to sort of leak a little bit of smoke, and then we quickly dispose of them or contain them away from us. So, but mobility scooters and power tools and those types of things, you'll see shortly the devastation and how quickly it can occur. So at the moment, it's estimated in Australia that households will have an average of 33 devices powered by lithium-ion batteries by 2026. That's Choice Australia. Currently, there's one battery fire per week, in 2023. Now, in 2024, there is now one lithium-ion battery fire per day in Australia. In the last 6 months, there has been 4 deaths linked to lithium-ion battery fires. Now, we still hear, this isn't in the slides, but we hear the media really concentrate on EVs and the fires that can occur from electric vehicles. It's actually a fallacy. That there's only been about 12 fires with electric vehicles since 2010 in Australia, and 10 of those have actually been from impact, where another car has hit an EV, which has then led to a fire. The 2 EV fires that occurred were in the first 3 years of electric cars really coming into Australia. So electric vehicles actually have excellent precautions in place, or mechanisms in place to stop their batteries from exploding or catching on fire. However, the media is using the EVs because it gets through to most people. If they're sitting there showing a mobility scooter or a golf buggy, people won't actually sort of link a fire to it, so that they'll brush it aside much quicker. So just showing a fire quickly here that can occur when these things explode. And this was a power tool. This one's a scooter. It actually engulfs a room. So unfortunately, the fire in South Australia, when that wheelchair exploded, we could imagine that actual lounge room would have been engulfed in a fireball. And this is the result. So this isn't South Australia, but this is a fire that's occurred in a home in Australia. And we can see that every inch of that living room is burnt, and adjoining hallways and stairwells, etc. So the thing with a lithium fire, once they start, you cannot put them out. They actually just have to burn out. So if you think about that in an apartment building or in a retirement villa where you might have interconnected homes, the devastation isn't just where the actual fire occurs, it's any adjoining building either side of it or up or below it. So the causes of lithium-ion battery fires. So manufacturing defects accounts for less than 1% of fires. Overcharging is what leads to over 90% of fires. So what actually happens is with overcharging, when a battery is charging, the actual case, when it overcharges, will swell. And then when it's off charging, it will slowly shrink back. But over continuous overcharging events, that casing will actually get bigger and bigger till it gets to a point where it'll actually fracture or crack. And that leads to physical damage, which could be an impact or a puncture from dropping something, or from overcharging, where it will eventually lead to that crack. So that will then eventually lead to what we call thermal runaway, where the actual heat gets outside that casing, and it will lead to a short circuit, which will then lead to the actual fire. So what we developed with the switch star 8, it actually does two things. We can see the last point of this slide here is the short circuits. So if we do notice a short circuit in a device that's charging in one of our power points, it acts like an RCD switch, where it will just immediately shut off power to that device. And that will stop the short circuit from continuously creating a spark, which will lead to a fire. So it minimises the risk. It can't be guaranteed, obviously, but the 8 hours that we designed for the battery, which was, for the PowerPoint, was based on information we received from all the major manufacturers of batteries for scooters and golf buggies and power tools, that 8 hours was the sweet spot, that if someone overcharged for 4 hours, it won't actually do any damage to the battery. Even if they're doing it every second day, overcharging 3 or 4 hours, it won't actually lead to major expansion. If they leave just something plugged in, and we all do it. I know I do it at home. I use a power tool on a Friday night and I leave it on charge, and I remember on Sunday to go and switch it off in the garage. So we all are guilty of leaving things on charge for 24 or 36 hours at a time. So this led to the Switch Star 8, which is a PowerPoint. And what we tried to keep in mind in here is that there's timers and there's other products on the market where we can configure them via the internet or an app on our phones via Bluetooth. We can even have a timer. So there's some PowerPoints that exist with a little timer on them. And the whole issue that we were trying to eradicate is human intervention. We all make mistakes. We all forget to do things. And we also sometimes all do things wrong. So the insurers were really big on us actually developing something that required no human intervention. Once this has been installed by an electrician and we plug something into one of the power sockets, we basically press the button and turn it on, and no matter what, after 8 hours, it will switch off. Now, the reality is 1 minute later, someone can go and press the button again to restart an 8 hour cycle. But we also got a lot of evidence to suggest that many retirees charge things between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. at night. That's when they actually put things on charge. So it's very unlikely that someone's going to go out to their garage at 12 or 1 in the morning to restart a charging event. So that's where we got the 8 hours from. So some of the features just of the product, and I won't stick too long on this, is the actual device itself is fire retardant. It actually acts as an RCD switch. So if it detects something unusual coming from the device, it will switch off the power to the circuit, and it turns off after 8 hours. So they're the three main things that we sort of wanted to emphasise with this product at the moment, that it requires no one else to be involved. It's just installed and away it goes. Some of the frequently asked questions we get is how many fires occur each day. Like, a lot of people are shocked, but as I said, there's over 4 fires a day on average in Australia, but one that's linked to a scooter, a wheelchair, or a power tool. The rest can be mobile phones, these e-cigarettes that people have, and these vapes that people are recharging. A lot of them are catching on fires and caught up in these statistics. But linking it to a wheelchair, a mobility scooter, a golf buggy, or a power tool, there's one a day. Going through, in most instances, when the wall casing of that battery is damaged from expanding excessively, in instances that battery will split, which will lead to lithium-ion fire going off like a bomb. And as I said, that is a fireball that will fill a lounge room or a garage. It's quite devastating. The the causes of the battery fires, the continual overcharging, incorrect charges being used. So we get a lot of residents writing to us inquiring about the switch star, but actually asking us about the charges. So it's very important to ensure that the residents are educated to ensure that they're buying new charging cables or batteries from where they purchased their original scooter or power tool or golf buggy. The smart chargers, there's this fallacy that I plug my battery into a smart charger that plugs into a power point. I don't need something like the switch star. Well, it's those smart chargers and those cradles that fail and leave the battery sitting there charging or sitting there getting power and getting hotter and hotter. So the whole idea is keep it simple and keep it real, and we just cut power off to that whole environment after 8 hours. So we're not relying on any other third-party product to continue working. The switch star, one of the key features and designs of it is if anything fails in the circuit of the switch star, the power point itself, the whole thing just shuts down. So it can't malfunction. It either is working or it won't work. And that was part of the design that we did involve. The switch star, how does it help? And I won't just limit it to the switch star. I know I'm here representing that, but if there's another product that does what we do on the market, the main thing that we're looking for is let's remove the human intervention for our residents to keep them safe. Let's have something that they can just plug into and it will just turn off automatically. We don't need to have a human set any type of parameters or features of the device. It will just work when we plug into it. The switch star will, as I said, detect anything over 2400 watts. So if it detects something that's not correct from the device, it will shut off automatically. And the switch star will immediately reduce the risk if the smart charger connected to your battery fails. So if there's no power, half of our risk is eliminated straight away. These devices, we get asked about this a lot. So we're looking for the whole new development market in Australia, whether it's retirement or not, to have one type of these devices installed in every home, whether it's in the garage or in the laundry, depending on an apartment or a house. The whole thing comes back to where do you need a switch star or where do you need a product like this? So if someone's continuously charging things like electric wheelchairs, mobility scooters, e-bikes, electric golf carts and buggies, and power tools in particular, any device with a lithium-ion battery that's sort of bigger than your fist, we'll call it, which is your power tool plug-in, anything or anyone that has a device like that in their home, we really should be looking at some type of product like a switch star to be installed. So that's really what it's about at the moment, or where the market's at. The insurers in the retirement industry are getting behind the product, so that they're offering premium reductions to operators that install them. But the big thing about it is educating the retirees that overcharging is the biggest factor of why a fire or a lithium-ion battery fire can occur. So it's that overcharging event that we really want to stop. And it's not just the person using the device, it's obviously residents that are living either side of them or above them or below them. So that's all for the moment from me.
Thank you very much, John. Very clear and very interesting. We have a few questions, but we'll leave them to the end. Just at the moment, I want to switch to Stefan Galeta from Stryker, and I'm going to tell you a bit about Stryker. Stryker is a global leading medical device and technology company within a public access setting. Stryker is the manufacturer of the market-leading AEDs, which turns out to mean automated external defibrillators, Heart Sign and LifePack. And Stefan is the business development specialist within the team, and his role is to raise awareness around sudden cardiac arrest, educate the public on AEDs, and provide support to businesses or individuals looking to access or implement AEDs. And Stefan, we're so grateful that you've agreed to come today and tell us about AEDs, automatic external defibrillators.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, Elizabeth? All
yes.
good?
Yes, we can.
Excellent pronunciation of defibrillator as well. You've done really well. But yeah, thanks for the introduction. As Elizabeth mentioned, I work for Stryker, a global medical device business. And my role within the business is to do exactly this, join webinars and educate and advocate for these devices, because there are often misconceptions about them. I mean, before I joined the team, I would see a defibrillator on the wall, and it's got the big symbol, and it's quite a sort of scary thing to think about or to approach, until I learned more about it. So my role here is just to educate as much as possible, and answer any questions as much as possible. So I'm just going to share my screen. I might need to.
It's come up, Stefan. That's good.
Perfect. So, and if you do have any questions following the presentation, please do scan the QR code and get in touch. But at Stryker, our mission is quite simple. We essentially, together with our customers, we're driven to make healthcare better. And within my team, the public access team that manufactures the AEDs, that's certainly true. We want to get more AEDs out into Australia to ensure that more people's lives are saved, essentially. So these are some of the businesses that we work with globally. I'm sure you can see some of the, you can recognize a few of those brands. But as mentioned, I think it's important, before we actually jump into what an AED is and what it does.
Sorry, Stefan, just to interrupt. We can see your home screen, but I can't see the slides. I don't know if anyone else is the same.
Thank you. Let me just pull that up. Is that better?
Yes.
Thanks for that. So yeah, it's important to sort of take a step back and to work out exactly what the issue is. So in terms of a defibrillator or sudden cardiac arrest, there's obviously always a common misconception that AEDs are devices that are used in the instance of a heart attack. And this is in fact not the case. AED is a device that's used in the instance of a sudden cardiac arrest. And what that actually means is it's an electrical malfunction within the heart. So the way that we think about it or explain it in the most simple terms is that a cardiac arrest is an electrical issue and a heart attack is a plumbing issue, so a blockage in the heart. So that's a really nice way to sort of think about it. In terms of the actual problem of sudden cardiac arrest, in Australia and New Zealand alone, 33,000 people a year suffer a sudden cardiac arrest. And this is out of hospital sudden cardiac arrest. So out in the public, at home, they'll drop down and suffer a sudden cardiac arrest. And within Australia and New Zealand, the real issue is that the current survival rate is only about 10%. So that's quite alarming. What we've seen is all over the world where countries have really adopted more AEDs into the community, that number has increased to 65, 70%, Seattle being the leads in this space. The second part of this sort of graph over here that you can see is the survival rate and what happens as time passes. An event like this is super time critical. And so you have only about 10 minutes to receive defibrillation and CPR until, unfortunately, the event is fatal. And as you can see by the graph, every minute that goes by, your chance of survival, unfortunately, drops by 10%. So most people that do rely on ambulance services for these types of events, with an average sort of response time of 8 to 12 minutes, I think you can kind of see what the problem is here. And so now that you sort of have a brief understanding of what the actual issue is, I'd like to sort of take you through what an AED is and what it actually does. So an AED is a portable device that is designed to be used by an untrained bystander on someone that's suffering a sudden cardiac arrest. So that is the most common misconception around the device is, I don't know how to use it, therefore we don't need one because I'm not trained. And I think that's the most important thing. The device is actually designed to speak to you and guide you clearly through the process. So what the device actually does is it automatically analyzes the heart's behavior, and it will automatically, if it's a fully automatic version, administer a shock or advise the user to do so. And in doing this, you physically cannot shock someone without the device telling or allowing you to. So that's another common thing. People will always say, oh, no, I'm scared I shock someone and they don't need it. The device doesn't actually allow for that. And so what the shock does is it momentarily stops the heart's unusual behavior from the sudden cardiac arrest, and then it allows it to beat and beat normally, essentially, after that. That's probably the most basic way I can explain that. In terms of, as I mentioned, the device speaks to you, guiding you very clearly through the process. And some devices and devices that we would recommend you look at are devices that will guide you in CPR as well. CPR is super important in the chain of survival. CPR with defibrillation pushes your chance of survival up to 75%. So really important to consider a device that has CPR, either guidance features or feedback features. In terms of other features of an AD, the devices can be used on adults and children. So some devices might need different pads to allow a lower shock for children, and some might just need a button that you push. Devices can be used in wet weather conditions as well. They're extremely portable, so they can be stored and transported in vehicles, stored in outside cabinets, and they do not need to be plugged in or charged. So these the batteries that are in the actual devices, in the case of ours, they're a 4-year lifespan. They sit in the device and keep the device ready to be used. And then in terms of someone with a pacemaker, they can be used on someone with a pacemaker. They just need to be placed in different parts, and the device essentially guides you to show you the placement of those pads. So that's a bit about AEDs and I guess debunking a few common misconceptions around them. I think I'd like to take you through a little bit about what to actually consider when you are looking to buy an AED to make sure that you buy the right device. There's obviously a huge range of devices out there, and ultimately you're doing the right thing by getting it. You want to make sure that it's something that's going to work properly for you. So we've split it up into clinical features and then the maintenance piece. In terms of clinical features, the things to consider are energy output and escalation energy. So you want a device that has high energy output and that escalates with each shock. Studies have shown that after a first shock, if it doesn't work, essentially, that a device that escalates in energy for the next shock is super important. As I mentioned before, CPR enhancement features are very important. So CPR along with defibrillation in the chain of survival is super important. So any device that gives you CPR feedback or guides you very clearly on CPR is a good device to consider. As I mentioned, semi and fully automatic options. I don't know about you, but in a case of emergency, if it's quite an alarming situation and you're being told to shock someone, some people freeze in that situation. And so having a device that will automatically deliver that shock might be helpful as well. And then the last two things, considering something that's extremely user-friendly and guides you through the process and has clear prompts is super important. And in some cases, child mode functionality is important as well. In terms of the maintenance piece, the things to consider are IP ratings. So that's essentially all electronic devices have this rating, and it is protection against dust and water. So the higher the rating on that, the longer your device will survive. In terms of the life of device, you want a device that can be used multiple times and that the accessories are the only things that you need to replace. And keeping in mind that accessory replacement piece is important to consider as well, both from a cost perspective, but also how easy is it going to be to replace these accessories? Is it a one-time sort of thing, or is it something that we have to change every second day? You want to make sure that it's as simple as possible on that. And so the last thing I was keen to run you through is is a solution around that. And what we think is really important to consider if you are buying a fleet of AEDs is this connected solution. So we've just launched a connected solution ourselves, and we believe that in terms of other three things there, reducing risk, saving time and money, and staying secure, it's a really important consideration to make sure that your devices are ready in an emergency situation, and that you save time and money on actually automating the fleet management task. So what the device does is it connects to a centralized platform. It allows your facilities and maintenance team to look through that platform, see that all your devices are ready to go and ready to be used in the case of an emergency, and as well as that, allow you to manage any devices that are going, their accessories are going out of date and you need to replace them. So we think it's a super important thing to consider to ensure the safety of staff, patrons, customers, whoever it may be. So look, that was a brief sort of run through of AEDs and what they do. If you do have any further questions, obviously we can answer them at the end, or you can scan the QR code and get in touch.
Look, thank you so much, Stefan, and very valuable that you opened up people to get in contact with you. It's a lot to take in all at the one time. But when we were designing the Summit webinar today, we thought it was really important to hear from senior executives in operational roles just about this issue of defibrillators and lithium batteries, and also more generally about emergency planning. So I'm really happy to introduce Jane Monks, a senior executive with Gannon Lifestyle Communities, and she's going to particularly talk about her villages, the new government legislation relating to lithium-ion batteries and defibs, and some other few thoughts, which to give an operational context to this question. Thank you, Jane.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. I don't have a slide deck, so I'm but happy to share my notes afterwards if you would like them. I'm actually going to start with defibrillators first of all, and just start with the legislation. So in South Australia last year, we had legislation introduced called the South Australian Automatic External Defibrillator Public Access Act. Sorry, it was 2022. That act comes into effect for buildings and facilities on Crown land from the 1st of January next year, and for buildings and facilities that are on non-Crown land the 1st of January 2026. So if you're operating in South Australia, it probably impacts you from the 1st of January 2026. The Act's currently going under review and will be amended before its implementation because there were a number of areas in it. To be perfectly frank, we could have done with some more consultation before the Act was actually approved by Parliament. So there'll be some changes to the Act, but notwithstanding all of that, effectively from the 1st of January 2026, if you are operating a retirement village in South Australia, you will be required to have defibrillators available within your communities. And also, if you're in a land lease community in South Australia, which operates under the Residential Parks Act, there's a similar requirement for that as well. So there's a range of matters relating to the legislation. It's about, because it's a Public Access Act, it is about your floor space that is accessible to the public, effectively. And then there'll also be a public register that the minister responsible will need to develop, and all of these defibrillators will be recorded within this public register. On a side note, outside of retirement villages, these defibrillators will become widely available through a range of commercial buildings, but also in public vehicles as well. So they'll be in taxis and Ubers as well. So we will have quite an expanded network of defibrillators in South Australia, which going to Stefan's point about increasing survival rates, we'll see quite an uplift potentially in the survival rates if people have a cardiac arrest, because they'll have easier access potentially to a defibrillator. There's also an act that's being introduced. There's a private members bill at the moment in the New South Wales Parliament. My understanding of that bill is that it's been based around the South Australian legislation, and that is going through the processes of the New South Wales Parliament. Interesting to note, the South Australian legislation started as a private members bill as well. However, Gannon's has actually put defibrillators in ahead of all of these legislative requirements. We operate 4 retirement communities, 2 in South Australia and 2 in regional New South Wales. We have about 600 homes with a pipeline to get to 800 homes, and around about 800 to potentially up to 1,000 people living in one of our communities over the next few years. About 4 years ago, we made the decision to put defibrillators into our various communities, and that was really resident-led. I think my recollection is we had an incident in one of our community centres where there was I'm not even sure if it was a cardiac arrest, but we had a significant incident, and a person passed away suddenly, and that led to quite particularly from that particular community, an uptick in interest in why didn't we have a defibrillator. We also found that we had staff going off and doing their regular first aid training. We staff 24 hours a day, and we provide on-site emergency response to our emergency call units. So staff were going off and doing their regular first aid training, and they were being trained in how to use defibrillators as part of this training course, and also coming back and saying, why haven't we got a defibrillator? And then finally, if we had ambulances attending, they were starting to question, you should have a defibrillator. So based around that community expectation that we were finding, we started to consult with our various residents committees and more broadly with our resident communities, and made the decision that for us the right decision was to start to put defibrillators in. Having made that decision, that we needed then to consider what type of units we were going to put in, where they were going to be located, who would have access to them, how we would signpost, what the appropriate training and maintenance schedules of looking after the defibrillators were. So to support that, we implemented ongoing staff training. We built a routine maintenance program around the defibrillators so that they're checked on a regular basis. It's quite an easy process. We're just really checking to see if the green light's working on them. And if they've been used, have we replaced things like the pads that are being used in them? And our maintenance schedules are really based around the manufacturer's specifications. Interestingly, though, since we've put the defibrillators in, and whilst I believe they've given great peace of mind to residents and to staff, we've only used them in very few occasions. I think across the 4 locations, we've used them once for a specific incident that was required for a resident in cardiac arrest. In other cases, because we've advised ambulance that we have them available, they've asked for them to be on standby. And in one location, because we're across the road from the school, and the school knew we had one, the school contacted us and said, we've got an incident going on, could we use your defibrillator? So if you are thinking about defibrillators, and ahead of any legislation, I'm only aware of the legislation in 2 states. I don't know what's happening in other states around Australia. I'd suggest that it's that community expectation, it's that resident-led consultation that we all do so well. It is not only, I mentioned staff training, it's also resident training and education as well. As Stefan suggested, some people are quite nervous about using the devices. What happens if I make a mistake? What happens if something goes wrong? So taking that opportunity to educate people about the benefits of them, the relatively low risks in using them, but also perhaps setting some expectations around where they'll be located, who will use them might be helpful for you. There is obviously some concerns around defibrillators that your lawyers may raise with you. So if you are considering defibrillators, considering any risks that you, whilst there might be benefits for defibrillators, there may also be potential risks for defibrillators. So do you need to consider getting legal advice before you go putting in defibrillators? And there are questions around how you manage advanced care directives and DNRs within this system as well. We've taken the view that if we do need to use one, it's within a genuine emergency, and therefore that's a reasonable expectation that we would use a defibrillator in the same manner that we would call an ambulance if we were dealing with an emergency on site as well. But they are important things to be aware of, and also to make sure that the residents are aware of these things as well. Those regular testing and maintenance programs, but also what do you do after you've used the device? So what needs to happen after you've used the device? What needs to happen to bring it back up to being available and ready for use following that? The other area I've been asked to speak on today is the lithium batteries. Of course, as John mentioned, there's been a number of fires in Australia caused by lithium batteries, and we've had a significant event and a death here in South Australia due to a lithium battery and a motorised wheelchair. So I think, as John's alluded to, the lithium battery fires are a genuine safety consideration for all of us, not only for our residents, but also for staff and for visitors, and the impacts to that broader community. I'd suggest that the way to approach this is that it's the same way that you would treat any other hazard within your business or your community, and that is that you recognise that there is a hazard caused by them, that they do feature on your risk registers and your hazard registers, and then going through that process of what do I do when I have a hazard, and working through what the mitigating actions are that you can put in place for those hazards. Some things are going to be a lot easier to deal with immediately, and other things are going to take a longer period of time to address. So what we've done at Gannon's is recognising that we have, particularly around gophers, a number of gophers within our communities. We operate on broad acre sites, but we do have assisted living apartments attached to the community centre, and we're very much focused on the gophers within our community centres at the moment. When this first was flagged as an issue, we started an education process. We have a fact sheet that's been developed that we've put out to all residents. I'd recommend that we, on a regular basis, that you're reminding people about charging, and that making sure that they're not charging things inappropriately, that they're looking after gophers and other devices in accordance with the manufacturer's directions. If you do need to replace a charger, that you're replacing it with the one that's specified. Our next steps that we've taken is identifying how we can move gophers from outside of our community centres, and identifying areas for storage that are external to our community centres. So how do we create a gopher charging bays that are outside, but are still protecting the asset that the resident has? And we are in our newer areas where we're improving by design. So we're saying that we need to have a GPO with a cutoff within our villas as we build them, within our apartments as we build them. And where we don't believe that we can remove park gophers outside, we're then looking at updating existing PowerPoints to PowerPoints that have got automatic cutoffs on them. So I think it's about any other risk. You look at it, you go, this is a hazard that we have. Where are these hazards likely to occur? What's the risk and the consequences of that? And John's clearly demonstrated that in his slide deck. And then what are the mitigating actions we can take to either eliminate or reduce those risks to an acceptable level? And each of us are going to come up with different standards that are acceptable both to our safeguarding our communities, but also our businesses as well.
Thank you
I
so
think
much.
that's
Jane.
everything from me.
Yes, thank you very much, Jane. Now, I'm going to introduce Kim Toyd, who's the General Manager, Retirement Living at Bolton Clark and the RLC Vice President. And I'm going to ask her to take a step, to take an even more helicopter view, because she and I were talking about black swan events, planning for extreme weather, and things that come out of left field. And she had some very interesting insights that I found really helpful. So over to you, Kim.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm going to firstly start with, hopefully Deborah can share her screen for us. I'm going to start with, as Elizabeth said at the opening, how does this link to the Code of Conduct firstly? And I'm just going to, if you go to the next slide, Deborah, that'd be great. Just to point out the ARVIS standards, in particular Standard 5.6 and Standard 6.3, and these slides will be available to you after the session. These standards, you must be compliant with the Code of Conduct to be compliant with the standards. So everything is interlinked. For those of you who are not familiar, I've pointed out the most pertinent parts of those standards for you there, where an emergency call system is in place and it must operate in accordance with contracts and agreements. The emergency call points and their locations, all of these things would be assessed during an accreditation visit, for example. And where the emergency call system is contracted out to a third party, that is a monitoring centre or so on, that service quality and that contract is monitored and managed. The next component is 6.3.1, 2 and 3, which is emergency procedures, that they're documented, readily accessible to staff. Staff have been trained in their use. That a documented evacuation plan is in place, and practice evacuations for both staff and residents are conducted at least annually. And community access and layout information is available to emergency service to assist in the event of an emergency. Now that all sounds quite reasonable and something that you would expect as a resident of a village. In fact, in order to comply with some of those things, it can become quite complicated in an event. Also, with the emergency services, it's really important to have a regular update because those staff change. Where do they access keys? How do they actually know where to go in your village? How well connected are you with those local emergency services team? Basically, if you're a manager, you should be well connected into that, the disaster management planning. And if you're obviously at a senior team level, you would expect your team to be very engaged in that. These are very significant connections to have in your communities when there's an emergency or a disaster. Deborah, if you'll just go through to the next two slides. So we had a disaster. We had a cyclone in Townsville early in the year. And we've had many, I've been through many of them in the number of years that I've been in the industry. But one thing that we always relied on, for example, I'm going to focus on on our emergency call system, which is basically the lifeline for residents, both for emergency medical emergencies and also for maintenance or intruder emergencies. We've relied on the fact with the meeting the Australian standards, and it is important to have your system reviewed to ensure they're in accordance with the new standards. They have a 40-hour and must have a 40-hour battery backup in them as only one of the requirements. The cyclone, as it turned out, went on for 2.5 days. So what did Bolton Clark do? Obviously, we did the initial, making sure that all residents were aware we were there for them. They had no power. It's very hot and steamy in Townsville. We ensured they had water. We ensured there were staff on site. We pulled in resources. We ensured that we had offline contacts where needed because everything went down, all power. Although we could get it through Brisbane, you've always got to be aware that we've had an incident this week somewhere where everything went offline. So how often do you back up or keep an offline version of all the emergency contacts? Taking a resident-focused, resident-first approach to everything you do, what happens in the case of. Fortunately, a larger number of residents due to COVID now have mobile phones, which is amazing. So as long as the network is working, and in this case during the cyclone, the mobile network was working, which was terrific. We used a TIMS system. That's the information system. We can send it out. It doesn't matter where our staff are. That could be in WA sending out the messaging to Townsville. It doesn't matter where they are, because we mobilise to ensure that our staff on the ground are available and resourced to actually just care for residents when we do all the other stuff in the background. We kept them up to date. We let them know what was going on. But before this happened, before the era of mobile phones, before we actually had TIMS in place, guess what we were doing? Letterbox dropping, running around, putting notices in letter blocks, knocking on doors and telling all the other residents to tell everyone else. And in a big village, this actually is a time delay and resource delay that you can't afford. So these things are very important. Ensure you have lists of your vulnerable residents. I obviously was supporting and have supported all of these events. In this particular one, we obviously get our emergency management team together and we go through immediately who the vulnerable residents are and who is likely to need more support than others. Importantly, understand or have a system in place for self-evacuations. I learnt this years ago in another disaster that occurred, that a lot of residents self-evacuated and therefore we actually had no idea who was on site and who wasn't and where they had gone. So having that self-evacuation process, which is embedded in all of our processes, having that also so that residents know what they are to do if they're going to leave the site and go to a loved one. Just going back to this page in front of you, the mobile network, although not lost entirely, it made communications difficult because it was under load, right? And that is where we are reliant upon Telstra with the system. When that goes out, you really don't have any of that available. So it's basically resource on the ground, hard copy, whatever you have to contact residents and their families. In this situation, Bolt and Clark actually provide the InTouch system, and we have significant backups in place. The monitoring centre was wonderful, and we have a call centre as well. We all kicked into gear. We could foresee that our backup batteries after day 1.5 is going to be vulnerable. That is, it will fail. So at the 20-hour point, we actually advised residents and we advised them of what to do, and we advised them that their emergency response system that we provide them will most likely not work after a period of time. So we continually updated and made sure there was a backup. That worked really well. We had no major incidences. We had obviously, fortunately, that is a co-located site. So we had a generator for the aged care facility. And fortunately, the generator was linked to one of a very small little community space that the residents in the village use. That had power. They could charge their phones. They were all cooking for each other. Anyone who could cook did cook. Anybody who, wanted to go up for a coffee and chat, we put coffee machines in there and all of that. All of the things that you do as village management, we did. And the residents, fortunately, were able to keep their mobile phones charged, and they just all worked it out themselves. if all the PowerPoints were full, they just came back and then powered up their phone. We have scripts, and we developed scripts for the National Call Centre because the scripts did not cover the event where we thought that the emergency call system would be without power. I've been around for a long time, and I don't think we've ever had an event where the emergency call system backup battery for 40 hours will fail because there's no power anywhere. And it's likely that we will have more instances like this. We did on the Gold Coast have nearly 5 days out. So anybody with emergency call systems, I really just send a call out to you, check them, ensure you're meeting national compliance, and have a system and a process in place for when that power goes out, because now it's not an if, now it's a when. Our business continuity plans worked well, which was great, because obviously we do great debriefs after all of these events. What have we done though? We've implemented a new process for reviewing and updating resident emergency contact details. Not every one of our contact details were up to date. We've now accelerated that, so we do an annual update as a very minimum and an update as needed. And we've heightened that awareness of residents to say, if you have a change of an emergency contact, please let us know. So newsletters will remind them. Just as a word of encouragement to all of you, there's emergency contacts that resident will supply to the emergency response centre. They may not be the emergency contact or the next of kin that they supply when they move into the village. So another thing to be aware of, have predefined scripts for all stakeholders. And the stakeholders here included the residents, their families, their representatives, the local community, the whole disaster management team. And Townsville's got a great disaster management team up there. And that's all the levels of government, fireys, police, the whole lot. Refined and distributed those communications channels for clients and residents in the business units. We not only have residents in retirement villages that use our InTouch emergency response system, we also have a large number of clients that live in the community in their homes, and they were all affected as well. So I hope that will help, and there's a few tips and hints there for you. Deborah will put the contact details of our Anthony, who looks after all of our emergency response system and can also provide support other organisations. She'll put that also in the chat or when she sends out the details if you want further information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kim. I loved your emphasis on relationships with the local emergency management system. Remember that our villages are not in isolation. That was great. I loved your emphasis on business continuity plans. Now, in the event we won't have enough time to take questions, if you want more information about the Code of Conduct, you can get a copy of the free copy of the Code of Conduct. Visit www.awisemove.com.au for the Code of Conduct. As we said before, Deborah will be sending out to all people who've signed up for this webinar the slides and the recordings. But also just to acknowledge that some people we've got about 5 really useful questions, or now 6 in the chat box. We're going to capture all those questions, and the speakers have very kindly agreed that they will provide an answer to all those questions, and we'll make those answers available to everyone. So what I'd like to finish off is by saying thank you so much to John O'Callaghan, Stefan Gilletta, Jane Monk, Kim Toyd, for joining us for this very interesting and stimulating conversation. Thanks very much to Deborah McDonald and Natalie and other people from the Property Council who've supported the webinar. And I thank you all for being so interested. We've had 72 people at least joining us today, and more people want the slides. In future, we're planning a webinar about every 3 to 4 months, and we would be very, very happy to hear your suggestions for topics that you would like covered, and we can arrange accordingly. So just get in touch with Deborah or myself, and we will get a further webinar up for the later in the year. Enjoy your day, and thank you so much. Goodbye.